The Zarkonian Empire had ruled over 40 star systems for more than 500 years. Their warships were feared across the galaxy. Their soldiers had crushed rebellions on 100 different worlds. When they arrived at a new planet, the local population had two choices. They could kneel and become servants of the Empire, or they could resist and be destroyed. Most species chose to kneel. It was the logical thing to do. When Zarkonian scouts discovered the small human colony on the distant world called Greenfield, they did not expect any problems. The colony was tiny, just 20,000 people living in simple homes near fertile farmland. They had no warships, no planetary defense systems, and no army. Their biggest weapons were mining lasers used to cut through rock. The Zarkonians classified them as harmless. High Commander Vexer was given the mission to bring the humans under Imperial control. He was a massive creature with dark blue scales and 6 eyes that could see in complete darkness. He had personally overseen the conquest of 12 worlds and had never failed. This mission seemed almost insultingly easy. He sent a message to the colony from orbit. The translation was simple: surrender within 5 standard days or face complete destruction. He did not bother waiting for a response. He was already thinking about his next assignment. On the surface of Greenfield, Governor Daniel Cooper read the message 3 times before he fully understood what it meant. He was 58 years old, former construction worker who had been elected governor because he was good at solving problems and keeping people calm. He had gray hair that was getting thinner every year and hands that were rough from decades of hard work. He had never imagined he would have to face something like this. He called an emergency meeting in the colony's community center. Every adult who could attend came to listen. They sat in rows of plastic chairs, their faces pale with fear. Some of the women were crying quietly. The men tried to look brave, but their eyes betrayed their terror. "I will not lie to you," Daniel said. "We are in serious trouble. The Zarkonians have given us 5 days to surrender. If we do not, they will destroy everything we have built here. Then we surrender," said Peter Walsh, one of the colony's farmers. He was a big man with strong arms, but his voice was shaking. "What choice do we have? We cannot fight warships with farming tools. If we surrender, we become slaves," replied Martha Collins, the colony's schoolteacher. She was a small woman with silver hair and sharp eyes. "I have read about what the Zarkonians do to conquered populations. They take the strong ones for labor camps. The old and the weak are left to die. Children are separated from their parents and raised to serve the Empire. But if we fight, we all die," Peter argued. "At least as slaves, some of us might survive." The debate went on for hours. People shouted at each other. Some walked out in anger. Others sat silently, too scared to speak. By the end of the meeting, no decision had been reached. That night, Daniel sat alone in his small office, staring at a picture of his late wife. She had died 3 years ago from a sickness the colony's doctors could not cure. He missed her terribly, especially now when he needed her wisdom most. His daughter Rachel came to check on him. She was 32 years old, an engineer who helped maintain the colony's power systems. She had her mother's dark hair and her father's stubborn chin. "Dad, you need to rest," she said. "How can I rest? In 5 days, everything we built will be gone. Our homes, our farms, our lives, all of it." Rachel sat down across from him. "Then let us not wait for them to destroy us. Let us do something." "What can we do?" "We have no weapons." "We have other things," Rachel said. "We have smart people. We have materials. We have 5 days. That is more than nothing." Daniel looked at his daughter. There was a fire in her eyes that reminded him of himself when he was younger, back when he believed any problem could be solved with enough hard work and determination. "What are you thinking?" he asked. Rachel smiled, but it was not a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who had just decided to do something dangerous. "I am thinking that the Zarkonians expect us to be weak and scared. They expect us to surrender or to die crying. They do not know anything about humans. They do not know what we can do when we are desperate." The next morning, Daniel called a different kind of meeting. He did not invite the whole colony. He invited specific people whose backgrounds he had studied carefully over the years, people who had skills that were not listed in their official records. William Drake was one of them. He was 65 years old, with a face like weathered leather and eyes that had seen too much. The colony records said he was a retired mechanic. The truth was different. He had served in the Earth military during the resource conflicts, doing work that was still classified 3 decades later. "You want us to fight?" William said. "It was not a question. I want us to survive," Daniel replied. "Fighting might be part of that. Or it might not. I am open to ideas." Susan Blake was there too. She was 47, a quiet woman who worked in the colony's chemical processing plant. Before coming to Greenfield, she'd been a research scientist for a weapons development company. She had left that job because she was tired of making things that killed people. Now she might have to use those skills again. "The Zirconians are carbon-based life forms," Susan said. "They breathe oxygen. Their biology is not that different from ours. Things that kill us will probably kill them too." "What are you suggesting?" asked Daniel. "I am suggesting that I can make poisons, nerve agents, things that will kill them before they even know they are dying. It is not nice. It is not honorable, but it might keep some of us alive." The group spent the rest of the day making plans. They talked about the colony's resources, its geography, its strengths and weaknesses. They studied everything they knew about Zirconian technology and tactics. Slowly, a strategy began to form. It was desperate. It was brutal. It relied on deception, sacrifice, and a willingness to do terrible things. But it was their only chance. Rachel worked on the technical details. She knew the colony's systems better than anyone. She knew how to reprogram the agricultural drones that sprayed fertilizer over the crops. She knew how to modify the mining equipment to create explosives. She knew how to turn their peaceful technology into weapons of war. "We cannot beat them in a fair fight," she told her father. "So we will not fight fair. We will cheat. We will lie. We will do whatever it takes." Daniel nodded slowly. "Your mother would hate this. She always believed in peaceful solutions." "Mom is not here," Rachel said quietly. "And if we do nothing, none of us will be anywhere soon." As the sun set over Greenfield, painting the sky in shades of red and gold, the colonists began their secret preparations. On the surface, everything looked normal. Farmers tended their fields. Children went to school. People smiled and waved at each other on the streets. But beneath that calm surface, something dangerous was growing. The peaceful colony was transforming itself into something the Zirconians had never encountered before. A trap. The countdown had begun. 5 days until the deadline. 5 days to prepare. 5 days to decide if they would live as slaves or die as free people. Daniel looked up at the stars, knowing that somewhere among them, enemy warships were waiting. He thought about his wife, his daughter, his friends and neighbors. He thought about everything they had built together over the years. "We will make them regret coming here," he whispered to the night sky. "Whatever happens, we will make them remember the day they threatened humanity." The colonists worked without rest for the next 4 days. They split into teams, each with a specific job. They communicated through handwritten notes and whispered conversations, careful not to use any electronic systems that the Zirconians might be monitoring from orbit. William Drake led the explosives team. They collected every mining charge and demolition device in the colony, then modified them into weapons. William knew exactly how to shape a charge to cause maximum damage. He had done this before, in places he preferred not to remember. "Dig trenches along these paths," he instructed his workers, pointing at a map spread on the ground. "Make them narrow and deep. Cover them with thin boards and soil. When their soldiers walk over them, the boards will break and they will fall in. At the bottom, we put spikes coated with poison." It was an ancient trap, something humans had used against each other for thousands of years. Simple but effective. The Zirconians, with their advanced technology, would never expect such primitive tactics. Susan Blake worked in a sealed room at the back of the chemical plant. She wore protective gear that covered her entire body. moving carefully as she mixed compounds that could kill with a single breath. The nerve agent she was creating attacked the central nervous system. One breath would cause paralysis. 2 breaths would stop the heart. "How much can you make?" Rachel asked her through the sealed door. "Enough to kill 1,000 soldiers, maybe more. But delivery is the problem. We need a way to spread it over a large area." Rachel had already thought of that. The colony had 300 agricultural drones designed to spray fertilizer and pesticides over the farmland. They could fly for hours, cover huge distances, and release their payloads with precision. Nobody looking at them would think they were dangerous. "I can reprogram them," Rachel said. "They will look completely normal until they start releasing the gas." Meanwhile, other colonists were preparing the evacuation. The colony had a network of natural caves in the mountains north of the main settlement. Generations ago, the first settlers had explored these caves and found them dry and stable. They had used them for storage and emergency shelter during the planet's occasional storms. Now those caves would become humanity's last fortress. Moving 20,000 people without attracting attention from orbit was nearly impossible. They did it in stages, mostly at night, using paths that went through forests and valleys where satellite cameras could not see. Families carried what they could: food, water, medicine, blankets, tools. They left behind their homes, their furniture, their comfortable lives. Children were told it was a camping adventure. Some of them believed it. The adults knew better. They smiled and played along for the sake of the young ones. Old George Miller was 83 years old and had trouble walking. His grandson carried him on his back for nearly 5 kilometers up the mountain path. "I am too old to be worth saving. Nobody gets left behind," his grandson replied. "That is not who we are." By the 4th day, most of the civilian population was hidden in the caves. Only the fighters remained in the colony, along with a few volunteers who had accepted they might not survive. What was coming? The most dangerous part of the plan involved the colony's 3 cargo ships. They were old vessels, designed to carry supplies between planets. They had no weapons, no shields, and engines that were slow compared to military craft. A Zarkonian warship could destroy one in seconds, but the colonists were not planning to fight with those ships. They were planning to use them as bombs. The colony's power generator used small amounts of enriched uranium for fuel. By itself, the uranium was not dangerous enough to make a nuclear weapon. But when combined with conventional explosives and compressed in the right way, it could create a blast powerful enough to destroy almost anything. 3 volunteers agreed to pilot the ships. Their names were Andrew Scott, Betty Young, and Carl Davis. They were ordinary people who had decided to give their lives for their community. Andrew was 42 years old, a cargo pilot who had spent 20 years flying between human colonies. He had no family left. His wife had died in a transport accident years ago, and they had never had children. "I have nothing to lose," he told Daniel. "Might as well make my death count for something." Betty was 55, a grandmother who had seen too many friends and loved ones suffer. She had 3 grandchildren hiding in the caves. She would do anything to give them a chance to live. "Just promise me you will tell them I was brave," she said. "I want them to remember me as someone who fought, not someone who gave up." Carl was the youngest at 31. He was quiet and serious, a man of few words. When Daniel asked him why he volunteered, he simply said, "Because someone has to." Rachel spent hours explaining the plan to the 3 pilots. The ships would wait hidden on the dark side of the planet's moon until the Zarkonian fleet moved into attack formation. Then they would accelerate directly toward the enemy ships, building up as much speed as possible. "You will not have much time once you start moving," Rachel said. "Their sensors will detect you within minutes. You need to reach them before they can shoot you down." "And when we reach them," Andrew asked, "press this button." Rachel showed them a simple red switch installed in each cockpit. The conventional explosives will detonate first, compressing the nuclear material. The resulting explosion will destroy anything within 3 kilometers. Betty nodded slowly. 3 kilometers. That is a lot of damage. It might be enough to take out several of their ships. Maybe more if they are clustered together. On the final night before the deadline, the colonists held a quiet gathering in the largest cave. There were no speeches, no grand declarations. People simply sat together, holding hands, sharing memories, saying the things that needed to be said. Daniel stood at the entrance of the cave, looking out at the stars. His daughter came to stand beside him. "Are we doing the right thing?" he asked. "I do not know," Rachel admitted, "but I know that doing nothing would be wrong. If we are going to die, we should die fighting. That is what humans do. Your mother would have found a peaceful way. She always did." "Maybe, but she is not here, Dad. We are, and we have to deal with what is in front of us." Daniel put his arm around his daughter's shoulders. "I am proud of you. Whatever happens tomorrow, I want you to know that. Do not talk like this as goodbye. We might survive." "Might," Daniel agreed. But they both knew the odds were against them. As the night grew darker, the colonists prepared for what was coming. Weapons were checked and loaded. Poisons were sealed in canisters. Explosive charges were armed. The 3 cargo ships powered up their engines and began moving into position. In a few hours, the Zarkonian fleet would arrive expecting an easy conquest. They would find something very different. The trap was set. Now all they could do was wait. High Commander Vexer watched the blue planet through the observation window of his flagship. It looked peaceful and quiet, a small world full of primitive creatures who had no idea what was about to happen to them. He felt nothing but contempt for the humans. They were weak, emotional, and stupid. They would make adequate slaves once they learned their place. "Send the final message," he ordered. "Tell them their time is up. They will surrender now, or they will burn." The communication officer transmitted the demand. A minute passed, then another. Finally, a response came from the planet's surface. A human male appeared on the viewing screen. He was older, with gray hair and tired eyes, but there was something in his face that made Vexer pause. The human did not look scared. He looked determined. "This is Governor Daniel Cooper of Greenfield Colony. We have received your demand for surrender. Our answer is no. We are free people, and we will not become slaves. If you want this planet, you will have to take it from us." Vexer laughed. The sound was harsh and cold. "You cannot be serious. Your colony has no defenses. You have no army. What exactly do you plan to fight us with?" "Come down here and find out," Daniel said. Then the transmission ended. Vexer's amusement turned to anger. How dare these primitives disrespect him? He would make them suffer for their arrogance. "Begin orbital bombardment," he commanded. "Target their main settlement. Destroy their power systems, their water treatment plant, their food storage. Let them spend a few hours in darkness and hunger before we send troops to collect them." Energy beams shot down from the Zarkonian ships. They struck the locations where the colony's critical infrastructure was supposed to be. Explosions lit up the surface. Buildings collapsed into rubble. Fire spread across what had been quiet streets, but something was wrong. The sensors showed massive destruction, but they detected no human casualties. No heat signatures from bodies. No distress signals. No screaming on the radio frequencies. It was as if the entire population had simply disappeared. Vexer stared at the data in confusion. "Where are they?" "Scan the surrounding area." The scan results came back moments later. The humans were not in the settlement. They were not in the nearby farms. They appeared to be hiding somewhere in the mountains to the north, beyond the range of precise sensor readings. Clever, Vexer admitted. They moved their people before the attack. But it will not save them. Send in the ground forces. Find the humans and bring them to me. 24 dropships descended through the atmosphere. Each one carried 200 Zarkonian soldiers in full combat armor. They were equipped with pulse rifles, energy shields, and enough firepower to level a small city. They landed in a wide perimeter around the destroyed colony and began advancing toward the mountains. The soldiers moved with professional efficiency, scanning for threats, covering each other's movements. Their commanders expected some resistance, perhaps some desperate humans with improvised weapons. They were ready for that. They were not ready for what actually happened. The first wave of soldiers walked right into William Drake's trap. The thin boards covering the trenches collapsed under their weight, dropping dozens of soldiers onto poison spikes. The Zarkonians screamed as the toxin entered their bloodstream, their limbs going numb, their hearts failing within seconds. The commanders called for their troops to stop and scan for more traps. But while they were standing still, the agricultural drones appeared on the horizon. There were hundreds of them, flying low and slow. Looking exactly like harmless farming equipment, the soldiers barely glanced at them. Their sensors classified the drones as civilian machines, no threat rating. Some even made jokes about the primitive technology. Then the drones released their cargo. Susan Blake's nerve agent spread through the air like an invisible cloud. It had no smell, no color, no warning. The Zarkonian soldiers breathed it in without knowing anything was wrong. They died in seconds. Their bodies convulsed as the poison destroyed their nervous systems. They collapsed where they stood, their weapons falling from their hands. Their eyes wide with shock and confusion. Nearly 1,000 soldiers died in the first 5 minutes. The survivors broke formation and ran toward their dropships, desperate to escape the invisible death that was killing their comrades. But the colonists had expected this. The paths back to the landing zones were lined with explosive charges. When the fleeing soldiers triggered the motion sensors, the ground erupted in fire and destruction. Vexer watched the disaster unfold from orbit, his 6 eyes wide with disbelief. This was impossible. These were primitive farmers. They were not supposed to be capable of this. "Pull back all remaining troops," he commanded, his voice shaking with fury. "Orbital bombardment? Maximum power? Burn everything. Burn the mountains. Burn the forests. Leave nothing alive on that planet." His ships prepared to fire. Weapons systems charged to full power. Targeting computers locked onto the mountain range, where the humans were hiding. And that was when the 3 cargo ships emerged from behind the planet's moon. Andrew. Scott was the first to see the Zarkonian fleet on his sensors. 12 massive warships arranged in an attack formation, their weapons pointed at the planet below. He felt his heart pounding in his chest, but his hands were steady on the controls. "All ships begin attack run," he said into his communication device. "It has been an honor serving with you." Betty Young's voice came back, calm and clear. "See you on the other side, Andrew?" Carl Davis said nothing. He just pushed his engines to maximum power and aimed directly at the largest Zarkonian ship. The cargo ships accelerated rapidly, building up speed as they dove toward the enemy fleet. The Zarkonians detected them almost immediately, but they did not see them as threats. Why would they? They were unarmed civilian vessels, probably refugees trying to escape. By the time Vexer realized what was actually happening, it was too late. The first cargo ship hit the Zarkonian flagship dead center. The conventional explosives detonated on impact, compressing the nuclear material exactly as Rachel had designed. The resulting explosion was brighter than the sun, a flash of pure white energy that consumed the flagship in 2. Nearby destroyers in an instant, the second and third ships hit their targets moments later. 2 more warships vanished in nuclear fire. A 6th ship was caught in the blast radius, its shields overwhelmed, its hull torn apart by the force of the explosion. Half of the Zarkonian fleet was gone in less than 10 seconds. The surviving ships scattered in panic, their formation broken, their crews in shock. They had come here expecting to conquer a primitive colony. Instead, they had flown into a nightmare. Deep in the mountain caves, Daniel Cooper listened to the reports coming through the emergency radio. His hands were shaking. Tears streamed down his face. 5 ships destroyed, Rachel said quietly. Maybe 6. The rest are retreating. Andrew, Betty, and Carl. Daniel asked, even though he already knew the answer. Rachel shook her head slowly. They are gone, Dad, but they took half the enemy fleet with them. Daniel closed his eyes and said a silent prayer for the 3 brave souls who had given everything for their community. Outside the caves, the sky was filled with fire and debris. The Zarkonians were running away. The impossible had happened. The humans had won. The news of the Battle of Greenfield. spread across the galaxy faster than anyone expected. Within days, every spacefaring civilization knew what had happened. A tiny human colony with no military had destroyed half of a Zarkonian battle fleet. They had used poison gas, suicide attacks, and nuclear explosions. They had killed nearly 3,000 enemy soldiers and sent the survivors running for their lives. Nobody could believe it at first. The Zarkonian Empire was one of the most feared powers in the known universe. They had conquered dozens of worlds without ever suffering a serious defeat. And now they had been humiliated by farmers who fought with repurposed farm equipment. High Commander Vexer was dead, killed when his flagship exploded. The survivors of his fleet told stories about invisible poison that killed without warning, and ships that flew directly into warships without any attempt to survive. They described humans as insane, unpredictable, and terrifyingly dangerous. The new Zarkonian war commander was named Admiral Thorax. She was older and more experienced than Vexer, with a reputation for cold efficiency. When she reviewed the battle reports, she felt nothing but hatred for the species that had embarrassed her empire. "Prepare a full revenge fleet," she ordered. 100 warships. 50,000 soldiers. We will wipe that colony from existence. We will kill every human man, woman, and child. We will burn their world until nothing remains but ash and memory. But before she could launch her attack, something unexpected happened. The Galactic Council demanded an emergency session. The Council was the closest thing the galaxy had to a governing body. Representatives from over 400 different species gathered in a massive space station to discuss matters affecting interstellar civilization. Most of the time, they accomplished very little. They argued endlessly about trade agreements, territorial boundaries, and minor diplomatic disputes. But the human situation was different. This was a matter that could affect everyone. Ambassador Xylith of the Noron Federation stood before the assembled representatives. The Norons were one of the oldest spacefaring species, wise beings who had observed the rise and fall of many civilizations over thousands of years. "Fellow council members," Xylith said, her voice calm and measured, "I have spent the last several days studying human history. What I have learned disturbs me deeply. I believe we are facing a situation that requires careful consideration." The holographic displays around the chamber activated, showing images from Earth's past. Ancient battlefields covered with corpses. Cities burning under enemy attacks. Soldiers charging into gunfire despite certain death. Humans have existed as a species for about 300,000 standard years, Xylith continued. For most of that time, they had nothing but primitive tools made from rocks and bones. Yet in that time, they managed to hunt every major predator on their homeworld to near extinction. They dominated their planet completely, not through superior strength or speed, but through persistence, cooperation, and a willingness to do whatever was necessary to survive. The images changed, showing more recent events. Massive wars fought with millions of soldiers. Weapons capable of destroying entire cities in single explosions. Chemical agents that killed thousands in minutes. When humans developed technology, they immediately used it to fight each other. They have been at war almost continuously throughout their recorded history. They invented weapons of unimaginable destruction. They created poisons that could kill millions. They built machines designed purely for killing, and most remarkably, they used these weapons on themselves. Admiral Thorax interrupted angrily. "They killed our soldiers. They destroyed our ships. They must be punished for their crimes." Xylith turned to face her. "And what crimes did your soldiers commit, Admiral?" "They came to Greenfield to enslave or exterminate a peaceful population. The humans simply defended themselves. They used chemical weapons and nuclear bombs. These are violations of every civilized standard of warfare. The humans had no other options. You gave them a choice between slavery and death. They chose a third path. Can you honestly say you would have done differently in their situation?" Thorax had no answer for that question. Xylith continued her presentation. "I want this council to understand something important about humans. They do not think like we do. They do not calculate odds and accept defeat when those odds are unfavorable. They do not surrender simply because they are outmatched. When you push humans into a corner, they become something different. They become dangerous in ways that are difficult to predict or control. More images appeared on the displays. Humans fighting against impossible odds throughout history. Small groups holding off massive armies. Individuals sacrificing themselves to save others. Communities rebuilding after devastating losses. The colonists on Greenfield knew they could not win a conventional battle. They knew that even if they destroyed the attacking fleet, more ships would come to punish them. They fought anyway. Not because they expected to survive, but because surrender was unacceptable to them. Death was preferable to slavery. The ambassador paused, letting her words settle over the chamber. Admiral Thorax is planning to destroy the Greenfield colony in retaliation for the fleet losses. I strongly advise against this action. If the Zarkonian Empire exterminates one human colony as punishment for resistance, every human in the galaxy will learn a terrible lesson. They will learn that surrender and resistance lead to the same outcome. They will conclude that they have nothing to lose by fighting, and they will fight with everything they have, holding nothing back. You expect us to show weakness? Thorax demanded. To let this insult go unpunished. I expect you to show wisdom, Xylith replied. The humans have embarrassed you. Yes. But they have not threatened your empire beyond defending their own world. If you leave them alone, they will probably leave you alone. But if you declare war on their entire species, you will create an enemy that will never stop fighting until one side is completely destroyed. The debate continued for many days. Different species argued for different approaches. Some wanted to help the Zarkonians crush the humans before they became a true threat. Others wanted to protect the humans and punish the Zarkonians for starting the conflict. Most simply wanted the problem to disappear. In the end, they reached a compromise. The Zarkonian Empire would not be allowed to retaliate against Greenfield or any other human colony. In exchange, the humans would accept strict limits on their military development. They would be allowed a small defensive force, but nothing capable of threatening other species. Council observers would monitor their activities. Breaking these rules would result in severe consequences. Daniel Cooper signed the treaty on behalf of his colony. He was not happy about it. The terms were unfair, designed to keep humanity weak and dependent on the goodwill of other species. But he had no choice. His people were alive, and that was what mattered most. As he put down the electronic pen, he made a quiet promise to himself and to all the humans who would come after him. We will remember this day. We will remember what we had to do to survive. And someday, when we are strong enough, we will make sure that no one ever threatens our people again. Rachel stood beside him, watching the alien diplomats leave the room. Is it really over? Daniel shook his head slowly. No, this is just the beginning. We have a lot of work ahead of us, and a lot of time to prepare. Prepare for what? Daniel looked up at the stars visible through the window, thinking about all the civilizations out there who now saw humanity as a potential threat. For the day when we do not have to ask anyone for permission to defend ourselves. For the day when we can stand as equals instead of begging for scraps. That day will come. It might take years. It might take generations. But it will come. And deep in his heart, he knew the galaxy would never be the same. 60 years passed like a river flowing toward an ocean. The galaxy changed in ways nobody had predicted. Old empires crumbled. New alliances formed. Technologies advanced. Species that had been enemies became trading partners. And through it all, humanity quietly grew stronger. The Greenfield colony became a thriving city of 2 million people. Where simple farms had once stood, there were now factories, research centers, universities, and training facilities. The caves where the colonists had hidden during the Zarkonian attack became a sacred memorial, visited by thousands every year. School children learned about the Battle of Greenfield, about the 3 pilots who sacrificed their lives, about the ordinary people who became warriors to protect their families. Daniel Cooper died peacefully at the age of 91, surrounded by his daughter, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. His final words were simple. Remember who we are? Remember what we can do. His statue stood in the central plaza of the city. With an inscription beneath it, he taught us to stand. Rachel Cooper dedicated her life to building humanity's future. She became one of the founders of the Human Alliance, the new government that united all human colonies under one banner. She helped design the secret research programs that would eventually produce weapons and technologies to rival any empire in the galaxy. She trained the first generation of human military officers who would defend their species. When she died at the age of 87, her daughter Laura took her place. And when Laura grew old, her children continued the work. Generation after generation, the humans built and planned and prepared. They followed every rule of the treaty while secretly developing capabilities that nobody else knew about. The Galactic Council grew comfortable over the decades. The humans seemed peaceful and cooperative. They traded fairly, kept their agreements, and caused no problems. Some council members began to question whether the restrictions on human military development were still necessary. Others argued that the humans had learned their lesson and were no longer a threat. They were wrong. 60 years after the Battle of Greenfield, on the exact anniversary of the treaty signing, the Human Alliance made an announcement that shook the galaxy. Ambassador Catherine Walsh stood before the Galactic Council, tall and confident, with the bearing of someone who knew exactly what she was doing. She was the granddaughter of Peter Walsh, the farmer who had argued for surrender all those years ago. Her family had learned differently since then. Distinguished representatives of the Galactic Council, she began. Exactly 60 years ago, our species was forced to sign a treaty that restricted our ability to defend ourselves. That treaty was necessary at the time. We were weak, outnumbered, and vulnerable. We had no choice but to accept whatever terms were offered. She paused, looking around the chamber at the assembled aliens. Today, I am here to inform you that the Treaty of Greenfield has expired. All of its provisions are now void. Humanity is no longer bound by its restrictions. Murmurs of alarm spread through the chamber. Some representatives began shouting questions and objections. Catherine waited calmly for silence before continuing. Many of you are worried about what this means. You have heard stories about human violence, human aggression, human capacity for destruction. Those stories are true. We are a dangerous species. We do not deny it. The holographic displays around the chamber activated, showing images that made many representatives gasp in shock. Hundreds of warships arranged in perfect formation, massive space stations bristling with weapons, soldiers in advanced armor training for combat. Over the past 60 years, while we appeared to be peaceful farmers and traders, we were actually building a military force capable of defending our species against any threat. We have 200 warships, 50,000 trained soldiers, and weapons technologies that we developed in secret. We are no longer weak. We are no longer vulnerable. Admiral Thorax, now elderly and frail, but still representing the Zarkonian Empire, rose from her seat. This is an act of aggression. You have violated the spirit of the treaty, if not its letter. The Council must act immediately to contain this threat. Catherine turned to face her directly. With respect, Admiral, your empire tried to enslave my people 60 years ago. You killed our citizens. You destroyed our homes. And when we fought back, you wanted to exterminate us completely. You have no standing to lecture us about aggression. The chamber erupted in argument. Representatives from different species shouted at each other across the room. Some demanded immediate military action against the humans. Others called for calm and negotiation. A few quietly admitted that they had always expected something like this would happen. Catherine raised her hand. And surprisingly, the noise died down. There was something about her presence that commanded attention. I did not come here to threaten anyone, she said. Humanity does not want war. We have seen enough war throughout our history. We know what it costs. We know what it destroys. We are not here to conquer or dominate. Her voice softened slightly. We are here to take our place among the civilizations of this galaxy as equals. Not as slaves, not as subjects, not as second-class beings who need permission to defend themselves. As equals, we will trade with those who want to trade. We will cooperate with those who want cooperation. We will be friends to those who treat us fairly. She paused and her eyes hardened. But we will never again allow anyone to threaten our existence. We will never again kneel before an invading fleet. We will never again accept a choice between slavery and death. If anyone attacks our people, our colonies, or our way of life, we will respond with everything we have. And as the Zarkonians learned 60 years ago, that is quite a lot. The council debated for many weeks. In the end, they had no choice but to accept humanity as a full-member civilization. The humans were too strong to conquer and too dangerous to provoke. Better to have them as partners than as enemies. On the day the vote was finalized, Catherine Walsh met with an elderly Zarkonian diplomat named Nexer. He was the son of a soldier who had died at Greenfield, killed by Susan Blake's nerve agent. "I should hate your species," Nexer said quietly. "Your people killed my father. They destroyed our fleet. They humiliated our empire." "I understand," Catherine replied, "and my people should hate yours. You tried to enslave us? You would have killed us all if you could. The past is full of pain. So where do we go from here?" Catherine considered the question carefully. "Forward, I hope. My grandmother used to tell me stories about the old days, about the fear and the desperation and the terrible choices they had to make. She said the worst part was not the fighting. The worst part was knowing that it never had to happen. If the Zarkonians had simply left us alone, if they had treated us as neighbors instead of prey, none of it would have been necessary." Nexer nodded slowly. "Perhaps you were right. Perhaps we created the very threat we feared by trying to destroy it before it could grow. Perhaps. But the past cannot be changed. Only the future is still unwritten." 300 years later, the Galactic Encyclopedia contained an entry about humanity that had been revised many times over the centuries. The final version read, "Humans are not the strongest species in the galaxy. They are not the most intelligent or the most technologically advanced. What makes them remarkable is their refusal to accept any outcome they find unacceptable. When threatened with destruction, they do not surrender. They do not negotiate from weakness. They fight with whatever they have, using whatever methods are necessary, till they achieve victory or are completely destroyed." The Galactic Council maintains a standing advisory regarding human contact. It consists of 5 words that have prevented more conflicts than any treaty. Never agitate the humans.